We're live streaming.
Yeah, she's doing manual copy. It's glitchy.
I feel like get started.
We can.
Ray, welcome families to our financial aid day. My first time today, running this for a minute. I'm going to let Stacey have the information and show a couple of questions that you have. So, welcome. Thank you. Probably first.
So I'm working at a technology, agricultural and technology college, and I am the worst person with technology. So I've been standing here this whole time trying to get my curriculum work. So now I am the curriculum. So forgive me for not moving around. I usually try to move around so I'm closer to everyone. But my name is Macy Banks, and I am Director of Financial Aid for Smith Industries. I have been there now for, I believe it's almost 17 years. Prior to coming to Morrisville, I was at a loan servicer, which is we have any loans from holiday parents and they go to Great Lakes. I may have worked on some of that for you. So I did that for a couple of years. And prior to them, I was at Albany Medical College, where I was Director of Financial Aid for 5 years. And prior to that, my alma mater, which unfortunately closed, Casanova College. And I worked there in financial aid for several years after graduating. So I've been doing financial aid for a very long time. And I honestly do this in my sleep. Like I wake up thinking about things about financial aid. So if at any point you have questions, please stop me, ask me the question. And what I don't know, I will find out for you. Pretty much anything that you need, we can probably get an answer tonight. And let's jump into our presentation. We have quite a bit of information to cover, and it is going to seem very overwhelming. And I try to make it as simple as possible when we look at the conversation of what financial aid is. And the key to financial aid, you'll find, is always going to be the FAFSA. Everything goes back to the FAFSA. And the FAFSA is the free application for federal student aid. This is our magic point. That is everything that we need to begin to discuss anything related to your finances for college. Financial aid is developed or composed of different items that are not only what you consider to be loans, self-help, scholarships, grants, and we'll go into all of that information. But financial aid is like a very broad stroke. So I have families that will sometimes only receive loans and they'll say, well, I didn't get the financial aid. Well, loans are a part of the financial aid package. Um, so when you fill out that application, and I'll show you some information on that because that has actually taken a change for this coming fall. So we have a lot of information going on with that, and we're still learning. So I've been, like I said, I've been doing this for so many years, and the entire time that I've been doing this, they have not changed this FAFSA. And so I feel like I'm going back to school myself because this is something very new, and we're all terrified because anytime the government makes a change, that means more work for us. So let's start here. Cost of attendance. Each school is going to show you what their cost of attendance is, and that really is just a budget for your student to go to school. And they put that number together because financial aid is usually composed early on in the season. So where you will see your billing won't take place until around June or July. Financial aid is typically going out way before that because we want to show you what you're eligible for so that there's paperwork to be completed and you can be on point and get things done prior to those bills arriving. So when we look at the cost of attendance, we're actually looking at what the direct charges are for the school. We look at indirect charges, so personal expenses, books and supplies. Those are items that would not show up on your bill. And then other schools will sometimes add in a loan service fee because there is an origination fee that will come off the top of your loans. And they will build in that so that you have that cushion to receive the maximum amount of your loan. Not all schools do that, some schools do. But this is where we will start. We start with the cost of attendance. And that is developed so that you can start to budget what your costs are going to look like. And you can look at that figure and determine how much you truly need to borrow and get a rough estimate of what your cost is going to be for the year. This year, instead of having what they called an EFC, which was an expected family contribution, they changed it to a student aid index. Does the same thing, has a different name, is being calculated different by the government. So when you complete the FAFSA, that main application, instead of us receiving an EFC, we're now going to receive an SAI. And that number is going to look at, as you can see, it's going to look at the student contribution. So if your student earned any income, it's going to look at if they're a dependent student, their parent contribution. And all those items are a measurement to tell us what is kind of what they expect that you can afford out of pocket if you had to pay. Honestly, that number, when we revert back to what it is currently, the EFC, we use that number to determine your grant eligibility. We also use it to look at sometimes scholarship eligibility, and then we use that to kind of gauge if you're eligible for certain grants, then we use that figure to also see that we can award any additional aid for you. The higher your number, the less grant money you're receiving. The lower the number, the higher your grants are going to be. So if you have a zero EFC, that's pretty good because that's showing that you're going to receive the maximum grant money, and the school will also look at you for any additional funding that they may have. So we talked about the cost of attendance and the student aid index. When you take those two figures, so you start with your cost of attendance, whatever your SAI is, and then it comes down to a financial need. That's the number that I'm trying to do. So your financial need is trying to be covered with your student loans, parent loans, any grants, any scholarships, work study. We're trying to meet that number for you. So if you have let's say your cost of attendance is $27,000, you come in with an SAI of 0, we're matching, trying to get to that $27,000 with the maximum amount of aid you can receive. So every school is trying to meet that financial need figure for you. So we're talking about the different types of aid that we would look at. Scholarships and grants, those are free dollars. Those are funds that you do not have to pay back, and that's what we usually call gift aid. The self-help aid are the loans and the employment. And the loans are broken out and shared between student and the parent if they choose to. Scholarships can be anywhere from the federal government, the state, as a New York State resident, TAP is a tuition assistance program. They will look at your state income and determine if you're eligible to receive funding. And so that is taken into consideration. Any scholarships the school offers, any scholarships that the student receives outside of the school, from high school or any programs that they've been involved in, extracurricular activities, they'll look at all that funding. Any monies that you put into that will be considered towards this packaging so that we're meeting that financial need. All these sources, I always encourage families to, on our website, we have a scholarship listing, and it's outside scholarship sources. And most places, institutions will have something available, but high schools should have something where you can pull up some information. Google, everyone Googles, you can find anything online. Always search out as many scholarships as possible, because the more scholarships you have coming in, which are your free dollars, the less you're taking out in loans and increasing in debt. Also, if anything is asking you to pay for it, steer away from it. You don't pay for free. So a grant or a scholarship is a free dollar for your student. You should not have to pay to receive that scholarship. So anything that's asking you for any type of application fee or to pay to search something out for you, stay away from it. The clearest way to go is actually studentaid.gov is the federal site, and they will also have a link for different scholarships, and then you can pull up that portal and go through it if you wanted to start there. But always look at anything that's going to offer free dollars before you start to look at the loans, because the more you bring in, the less it's going to take off of that cost and the less that you have to borrow. For parents, your employers, sometimes families don't even know if this is your first student going to school, that your place of employment may offer scholarships for students. So that's check with your HR offices to see if there's anything that's available, because again, every dollar is going to help. The school is going to show you through the federal side and the state side based on the applications you submit. And then the schools themselves will have a scholarship program, so you want to see how they're dispersing their scholarships. Sometimes it's based on the application process, sometimes it's a separate application, and you go through, like for us, we go through our advancement office. We actually have two setups. You can do merit scholarships through the admissions process, but then we also have application process that goes through the advancement office. And so students can get scholarships from both sides. Some of the federal funding that you can receive, there is, based on the FAFSA, again, your Pell Grant eligibility, and that is also looking at that SAI. So whatever your SAI is, it's going to tell us what your Pell Grant eligibility is. So I don't know how many of you are old enough to remember this, but sick day, staying home, Price is Right, my grandmother would always watch Price is Right. So I would lay there on the foot of the bed and watch Price is Right and being bored out of my brain. But I always liked the little guy that used to go up the hill as you guessed the numbers. And he would yodel the whole time, he'd go up the hill, and if you didn't get it right, you'd fall right off the edge. That's what your SAI is. Your SSI can be from a range from 0 to 99999. Once you get past a certain point, you kind of fall off the edge, there's no grant money, which is that SEOG funding. That Pell funding. Also with the SEOG is another federal grant, but you cannot receive that money unless you qualify for Pell. So if you don't qualify for Pell, you would never be offered an SEOG grant. If you do qualify for Pell and you still find that you're still short in trying to fund the students' cost of their education, you can ask the institution if they offer SEOG funding, because not all schools will put that on the initial award. For us, we have a very small piece of the pie when you look at all of the SUNY schools. So what I choose to do is, it's kind of the last dollar. So it's held back, it's not put on the initial awards because about, I'd say, 85 to 90% of our students are Pell eligible. So I would never have enough to help all of them. So that's why we hold it back. Other institutions that have a larger allocation, they will initially award an amount along with the rest of their aid. So if you qualify for Pell and you're still struggling, you can always ask if they offer an SCOG. Federal Work Study. Work Study is a program that is set up so that your student can work a minimum number of hours, mostly on campus are the positions, but a lot of institutions do have positions that are off campus, tied to community service. And those positions are set up so that the student can earn what I call pocket money. They're earning minimum wage, so it's not overly, they're not, breaking the bank with anything, but they have a chance to work a few hours a week, have pocket money that's less times they're calling and say, Mom, Dad, I need to get this. And it's a chance for them to actually become very familiar with the campuses. So Federal Work Study is offered to students, sometimes first come, first serve, depending on the institution, will depend on how many positions they have available and how many students can actually have an offer. Anyone that has indicated on their FAFSA that they're interested in work study and has gone through the process of submitting the information, the school will consider them for a position. Subsidized and unsubsidized loans. Those are the student loans. These used to be guaranteed student loans, was what it was called when I went to school. Subsidized and unsubsidized. The subsidized is going to have the interest paid for the student while they're in school. The government pays the interest. The unsubsidized will actually accrue interest on the loan, but they're not required to make any payments on that loan while they're in school. So that would be the difference between the two. And depending on what your SAI comes in at and what your other grants are, these loans will be split in two different ways. The maximum that you can have as a freshman is $5,500. And so that $5,500 is either going to be split $3,500 in a subsidized loan, $2,000 in an unsubsidized. But as that SAI creeps up, and depending on what other aid you're receiving, that split can be, you can go from $3,500 to possibly $2,500, and then the remaining would be offered in the unsubsidized. So you can never go over more than $5,500 between the two. Typically, it's going to be $35,000 and $2,000. As their student progresses in their academic career, they will become eligible for an additional $1,000 each year. So freshman year, it's $35,000 and $2,000. Sophomore year, it would be $45,000 and $2,000. Junior and senior year, it becomes $55,000 and $2,000 for each subsequent year. If for any reason a parent applies for a parent loan, that is also a federal loan option. If you apply for a loan and for any reason you're credit denied, because it is a credit-worthy loan, if you're denied, we can then offer your student an increase to their unsubsidized loan by up to $4,000. So it does have an option, like there's that one caveat that will allow them to have additional funding, but their base loans always are the $5,500, and then you have a parent loan for whatever that difference is, that gap you just took. You're not required to take a parent loan, but it will be offered to you. And if you choose not to, there are also what we call alternative or private loans. And those loans are in the student's name, but they do require co-signers. So there's different options that you can choose when you're doing the loan avenue. And if you decide that you want to take a parent loan, but you don't want to take the full gap that you're trying to fill, you can always split it and do partial parent loan, have your students do their loans, and maybe do an alternative loan, or do a partial parent loan and do a payment plan. So there's different options that you can look at when you're trying to make the payments and get the accounts paid off. HESC is the organization that holds the TAP. And TAP is a tuition assistance program, and this is only for New York State residents, and it is only to be used within New York State. So unfortunately, TAP does not cross state lines. There's like very few states that actually have funding. I know Pennsylvania has funding that goes across state lines. Um, Vermont actually has a grant that goes across state lines. New York right now does not allow TAP to go across state lines. What they will do is offer you the opportunity to, if your student is not full-time, they can still be considered for an award if they're part-time. That's a new thing that they've done this year. Before, you had to be full-time in order to receive TAP. Now they're looking at that fluctuation, so if the student's at 9 credits or 6 credits, they can still receive some type of funding from TAS and not have to worry that they're not full-time. There is the fact that you have to be, again, a New York State resident, so if you just relocated, the student has to have lived in New York for at least a year, has changed over my driver's license, and have become a full resident of the state to be considered for it. If the parent decides after the student graduates that we're moving out of state, student staying in New York to go to school, unfortunately, you have to do some type of special request to see if they will approve it, because TAP is following the state that the parent resides in. They will use your FAFSA to begin determining your award, and this is the tricky part. Normally, the FAFSA for the coming fall 24 would be available by now. The FAFSA, like I said, is going through a total overhaul, and they have not finished that process yet. FAFSA, they keep telling us, oh, it'll be ready in December. I will not hold my breath because I would like to do it a little longer. They say December, I'm thinking closer to January, but hopefully, they surprise us all and they provide us with this application. The trick is usually we will tell you, fill out your FAFSA first, because like you're saying, that's the key to everything, and then you do your TAP application. TAP has decided that they will allow families to do their application starting November 1st. They will hold them until they have access to FAFSAs. I don't believe it, but yeah. For 24-25? Yeah. Yeah. The new one for the fall 24 is not available yet. Yes. And you actually will, just to go along with that, you do a FAFSA every year. So you will have to do this process every year. But the easy part of it is after you've done it that first time, it's a renewal process, so you just have to go in and update numbers. But the 24-25 is not available yet. So you'll have to go back in and do that if your students. Did your student go to school this year? So he'll be going fall 24. Right, so your FAFSA is not available yet. Your FAFSA for fall 24 is the new one that's going to be available, which is supposed to be available in December. And when you're doing that FAFSA, you'll actually be using the 2022 tax information, not 2023. So it's prior year tax information, and the new application will be available mid-December, they're saying. And if they go back onto the right cycle, it will then be in 24, it will become available in October for the 25 school year. So you can only do that, everything for financial aid is always based on the year. So you do it once, it covers the year. Your billing will be fall, spring semesters. Anything that you submit for us, we set up so that it disperses for you properly for those two semesters. So you use 22 taxes. Federal taxes, 2022. Yeah. Right. looking at whatever the year is for the academic year. So fall 24, you do prior year, and you'll use the 2022 taxes. So in 2020, when you're doing your 2025 FAFSA, if it, let's say it's right on time, you're doing that for the next fall, you'll use 2023 taxes. So it's always prior year taxes, but that current application for that fall. Yes.
I was on a site today, and you can create a user and a password, and it gives you give that.
Yes, we haven't gotten to that.
I'm sorry.
That's okay. No, and that's fine, because like I was saying, TAP is going to hold they're going to let their application become available November 1st. That's what they've told us so far. So if their application becomes available, you create your accounts with TAP or HES to do that application. That is a separate application. Then you will, when they let us know that the FAFSA is available, you can go in and do your FAFSA. But because you're creating IDs, and we'll get into that a little further, you can go in now and create your FSA ID for the FAFSA so that you're ready. If you've already done one for 23, you created FSA IDs already. So you're already a step ahead, you're ready to go when they release that application. So if your student's going in the fall for 24, you can go in now and create your IDs. The student needs an ID, the parent needs an ID. And that's how you'll sign everything once you submit the applications. So HES is going to look at your TAP, that's going to look at your state taxes. Same tax year, 2022. So they'll look at that information for you. And that's how they're going to develop their award for you from the state. The other scholarship that they look at other than TAP is the Excelsior Scholarship. And the first thing everyone asks me about Excelsior is, oh, your student can go to school for free. That is not accurate. The Excelsior Scholarship looks at your Pell Grant and your TAP award, and then if there's still tuition not met from those two items, then they will give you an Excelsior Scholarship. But if you have, we said 0 EFC, and you're getting the maximum Pell Award and you're getting the maximum TAP award, you are already over the tuition amount from state colleges. So you will not receive an Excelsior Scholarship. Now you can be approved for the program, but you will not receive an award if your Pell and your TAP are more equal to or greater than your tuition amount. If they do not meet the tuition amount, that's when they will give you the award. They're looking at families that have a combined AGI of 125,000 or less. It should be more, because at that point, if you have, for the state, if you earn more than $80,000 for the year, there tends to be very minimal award given from the state, but they will review it and review your eligibility for TAP. Excelsior is trying to get that family in the gray area where they earn a little more, but don't qualify for the TAP. So that's why they're using the 125 as a baseline. Their application usually comes out in July, August. This year it came out early August, and it will stay open usually for about 3 to 4 weeks. It stays open, and then it closes, and then it will reopen again for the spring semester. And if you miss the first time, you can go in the second time to apply. They require that your students earn 30 credits a year. Typically, you have 2 semesters, so you're looking at 12 to 15 credits a semester. If you are looking at a student that's only doing 12 credits a semester, they will typically have to pick up courses either during the winter term or in the summer term to make sure that they have the 30 credits to maintain the award. If for any reason you don't make the 30 credits, they will remove the award. And once you lose the award, it is not something that can be returned. Unlike the TAP, we do a review at the end of each semester, and if the student hasn't met the GPA or the number of credits, we will remove the award, but they have an opportunity to complete a waiver to explain why they did not meet the requirements, and then it can be reinstated if it's approved. If it's not approved, they have to go the semester without it, potentially 2 semesters, and then it will be reinstated. Excelsior, once it's gone, it's gone. So the FAFSA, like we were saying, scheduled to be out this December. Once it is out, then that allows families to complete the application. Once you've been able to complete it, it will, I should back up. December is scheduled to come out, but it will take us at least a month, maybe a month and a half before we can actually process the application, because once the federal government has given us the go-ahead, our IT systems and our state system has to update all of our processing so that we can actually communicate between the federal government and the institutions. And so once we can do that, we can then download the information into our student information system, and then we can begin our process to tell you what you're eligible for. So applications, you can do your IDs now in preparation for when they're available in December. And you'll see that down close to the bottom, it states that some schools have a deadline for the FAFSA to be completed. This is all, everything's in turmoil because we can't keep a deadline right now because we don't know when it's going to be available. But I would say if your student has certain schools they're interested in, just monitor their websites to see if they have any information out there. Because if they do set a deadline once we have the go-ahead, they'll put that out for students to see when they're expecting to have that information. But as soon as we have access to it, we're going to begin processing. We've talked about the SAI and how we use it to determine certain eligibility for you. And again, you'll have to do the FAFSA every year. And once you do it the first year, it's the initial application. And then when you go back the next year, it's a renewal application. So it's just a matter of updating the tax information for that tax year that you need. And there's soon about this line is only when it's available at the normal time. But the sooner you do it, once we get into that access to the government system, the quicker we start to turn things out. So normally the application will be available October 1. Our first set of awards will go out the week of Thanksgiving. Just to give you an idea of what that window would be for setup. Now this could be a little different because we're trying to, basically taken the FAFSA and cut it in half. They're changing, like we said, the EFC to now SAI. You can add more schools to the FAFSA. They're changing and adding questions that have never been asked before. So we have to make sure that we have all the right data coming in to create this information for you. And unfortunately, when they make this new calculation, they're not sharing the full way of calculating with the schools. So we can't go in and kind of presume what you're going to have because we don't have that calculation. What we have now is a data retrieval tool where you can go in and actually pull information from the IRS for your tax information to go onto the application. They are now requiring that you, it's being renamed the Federal Taxpayer Information, FTI. You're now kind of being forced into using that tool to pull in the data, which is helpful because, again, it's going to look for the proper year for you, so it's hopefully cuts into some of that confusion of what year to use, but it is going to push you to use the tax retrieval once you go in because you have to consent for that through that process. Here are some more of the changes. The custodial parent is the parent that has been basically where the student has either lived or is receiving the majority of their support from. So if the parents are divorced, then it is, I have families that will say, well, we share custody so that their student is split between both households. Well, the year is not split evenly. So where is that student at the majority of the year? That is the parent that should be placed on the FAFSA. If you are married and both of you are in the household, then that is the family, the parents, both parents go on the FAFSA, and the student and any other information that it's asking. If you are divorced and remarried, that parent, that step parent, even if they are not responsible for that student, still needs to be on that application because that income is also in the household. So they have to be included. Um, if the When the application is properly started, the student has to send in the request for the parent to join the application, to enter their information. So there's this new consent, so you have to go through the FTI to consent and show that you are the person that is the adult that is for that student. The student will invite the parent, this is a new thing, invite the parent to enter data. So you'll get a separate email, the parent will, to go into this application, and then it allows you to see the information. So you're going to pay attention to that email address that you put on there, and we'll talk about that a little further into it also. There's different ways that you can do it now. There's FAFSA on the web, which is the electronic way, which is what they usually prefer. There is, I'm assuming they're saying paper. They're going to bring back the paper application again because they took that away from us a few years ago. But they're saying that they're going to have a paper application available. And the FAFSA on the web is now becoming mobile, where you could not do that before. If you tried to do it on your phones, it would seize up. It wouldn't let the process complete. So now they're making it accessible on mobile devices and always the electronic way on the desktops. So you'll have different ways to access it. The only way that you can use the FTI is if you're doing it on a mobile device or on your computer. When you're doing the paper, you're going to have to use your tax information. They have not explained to us yet how they're going to adjust that, especially if they're trying to push you to use that data. So we still have to find out more about that. Once you get to the page and you see, I know it's small writing, but it's the studentaid.gov is the home for the aid process. And this is what it will look like when you get there to show you the application and how to get started. And across the bottom, it has different tabs for you. So like if you're just starting the process and you want to go in and check on what it might look like or what you might need to complete the application, you can use the Get Prepared. Once the tab is available for the complete the FAFSA, that'll be there. When you complete your FAFSA, you receive what's called a student aid report. And that basically regurgitates everything that you put on that application so that you can see what your answers were and you can check things to make sure that they're correct. And so if you don't receive, the student will receive an email. Sometimes they mail out a hard copy depending on how the student answered that question. But if you don't have a hard copy of the student aid report or a student doesn't have their email anymore, you can come here and log in and have access to the student aid report. So you can see that information at all times. Then it just tells you like we're going through like what happens when you receive the aid and what your process is. And then again, when they're reviewing the FAFSA at the end of the year. This is supposed to be a smoother, simpler, and easier process for families. So again, we're waiting to see if that's going to be accurate. Again, they're trying to put in different edits to try to help. The application itself is pretty self-explanatory. It tells you what it wants and tells you where to find the answer. So I'm not sure how it's going to change and how they can make that even simpler for you, but it does have skip logic where it will now tell you, it will skip over questions. It will move you to the next section as as you answer the questions. So hopefully it does become a simpler process, and it isn't more intuitive so that it doesn't make you seem like you're spinning your wheels. Um, with them cutting it in half, we're not sure what the time frame is. Typically, right now with the current FAFSA, it would take you about 25 minutes if you sat down and went straight through it and you had all of your documents in front of you. So we're hoping that it is faster for families and it does give you more information that is more intuitive so that it does remove some of the confusion. So again, we're still waiting, so we're waiting to see what the turnout is going to be, and then we'll start to practice on them also so that we can help families complete FAFSA. And they're saying that once they do it, it's supposed to be more timely, but according to some of the information I've seen, it's still telling us it will take 7 to 10 days before we get the FAFSA. So once we start the process of downloading into our systems, it's still saying that it takes 7 to 10 business days before we would actually have access to a completed FAFSA. The FSA ID, we were talking about that a little earlier. This is how you electronically sign your FAFSA. This is how you'll sign some of the documents from the school. Also, TAP has their own ID that you'll create, and that's how you'll sign your application with them. They also use your driver's license to make sure that they connect you to the right people. The FSA ID is something that you will keep the entire time that your student's in school. So even if you have multiple students going to school, the parent will always maintain your same ID. Each student will have their own ID. So you can't have, if you have 3 children and they're going each year one behind the other, they'll each have their own ID, but you as a parent will only have your one ID, and you'll use that for each of your students when you sign their documents. If you make any changes to the FAFSA, it'll ask you to put your ID in. When you're logging in, it asks for your ID. And the general information that it's asking for the student and the parent is going to be their name, their birth date, their email address. Please don't use the high school email address because after they leave, some schools will allow them to still have access to the email. Eventually that closes out, so they don't have that. Students nowadays have multiple email addresses, so if they have an email address that they're going to check, that's the one that you want them to enter from their side. You cannot have the same email address and phone number for the parent and the student because it doesn't know how to differentiate, and it will block it because if you, for any reason, get locked out, it will send you a message to your phone, it will text you, and it can't do it. If you both are locked out, it's not going to know how to do one or the other. So you each want to have your own mobile number. You want to have an email address that is not from the high school, and the parent and the student can't have the same email address listed. They ask for a social security number, citizen status, and legal residence, because eventually that information is passed on to TAP, so they'll be able to see that if you're a New York State resident. This is the information that they're going to ask for, so they're forcing, I shouldn't say forcing, but they're pushing you to use the data retrieval tool, so your tax information is coming directly from the IRS, but you will need to have your tax information with you if you have it, if you know what your assets are, any untaxed income, all of that information is asked for on the application. You do not have to enter your, it'll ask you on the application for your checking and savings. That, at least it was a question. And if that's still there, you don't have to, that should not be included in your totals when you're doing these numbers. The parent of a dependent student is going to ask you for the same information, your tax information, your assets, any untaxed income, and ask for your marital status. And if you are married and filing separate, only one of you can be head of household. We've had issues, a lot of issues this year where parents are married and they file separate their taxes, but they both file head of household, and the federal government will not allow us to process FAFSA when it's set up like that. And that's when you're selected for verification because we have to ask for your tax information. And when we ask for the taxes to be changed, we get a lot of pushback. And so just be conscious of when you're filing your taxes, how you file, what your filing status is. If you're married, you should be either married filing jointly or married filing separately, but both of them cannot be at once. Yep.
Do you have to show any proof you have
They will go by your driver's license. So if you are from out of state and you just haven't changed it over yet, you might want to do that. The federal side, not so much. They're not going to pay much attention to that. It's the state side. Okay. We talked about parents being on the FAFSA. So it can only be a biological parent or an adoptive parent on the FAFSA. And if the parents are divorced, as we were saying, whoever is the custodial parent or has provided the majority of support for the student, that would be the parent that can go on there. And if you, as a parent, are remarried and your student is living in your household, that step parent has to be included on there. When I was saying that, about your cash checking and savings, not to include that in the totals is because you've already answered a question that will have that. So that asset is not to be included on the FAFSA. They're also looking at if you are let's say you have a family business and you have a second building or a farm that you're working from, your primary residence is not counted as an asset, but you have to look at the cost of the information coming from the business and whatever that second house is. So primary residence is not considered an asset. Life insurance is not to be considered as an asset. And retirement plans aren't looked at, but when you select for verification, they will look if it's a rollover or any information attached to it, but it's not considered to be income. Then you have the processing. So once you've completed that application, 10 to 14 days, once you've completed it and it's been entered, 10 to 14 days, you'll see your student aid report. And within that 10 to 14 days, like I said, the 7 to 10 days, we usually get the FAFSA. And then that's when we start our process for you. So it varies depending on what you've completed, and it will flag you if you are missing information or if the school needs additional information. It will flag you and tell you that it needs to be additional information submitted, and that's usually what they call verification. And when you get your student aid report, it will tell you on there if you've been selected for verification so that you can prepare for the institution asking you for the additional documentation. When we do the verification, what's happening is we basically go back in and redo your FAFSA to make sure that you've answered everything correctly, everything's where it's supposed to be, and then we submit any changes to the government and to you to let you know that there's been a change to the FAFSA. There's about 30% of the incoming applications that we receive are selected for verification. So all the ones that are selected, we have to actually complete verifications for. And that's not only with our institution, that is every institution. So if you're selected at one place, you're selected for all. So we get your FAFSA, we start to review the information, we possibly request additional documentation, and then we start to put together information and determine what you're eligible for. We send out the award notifications that shows you all of that we know at that time. So any grants and scholarships, your loans, any outside sources that you may have shared with us, all of that information is provided. And Morris goes directly to the student portal. So the student goes directly to their web for students, and that's where they see their information. Some institutions will send you a whole packet, like you actually have a hard copy in your hand to see what's being offered. So each place is going to vary, but Most of us have switched over to an electronic process where you might get a letter, but then it's going to direct you to the actual portal to see the information. Once we do that, communication is usually very different. We, as a college, have chosen to send information to not only the student's personal email address, but we utilize their Morrisville address. And we do that to try to get them in the habit of using their Morrisville email address. So they will receive notification at both places, and at some point we then wean it off with the personal address and only go through the Morrisville address. So the student has to make sure that they're going to their Morrisville address to check their emails. Other schools will only send to their school address. So you want to check each institution to see how they're processing and how they're notifying you. And you can always ask the question, how are you going to notify us? Where are we going to find you? And they'll tell you right off the bat because it's already set up, so they know where they're sending things. We also do what's called a tracking. So every week an email goes out to the student to say, we still have something outstanding, and that will go out until it's satisfied. Or the student calls and says, oh, I'm not doing that, and we can cancel it out. But every week we send out a notification, and it goes to, right now it goes to both email addresses so that they can't say that they haven't seen it. We still get that, but it goes out weekly. And other schools will just kind of post a checklist and post it once, and as things tick off, they'll kind of change color or fall off of the list, and they won't send out weekly notices, but we chose to notify them weekly to push along the process, because the sooner we get documents, the sooner we can review things, the sooner we can update the accounts, and it's the most recent information for your students. Going back to the HES information, this is what their information is going to look like. They ask you to set up a PIN number. The student creates an account, and this is all under the student's name. And they will go in, and that's where they'll do their TAP application and get the information started there. It will ask for a parent signature at the end, but it's going to start with student information, and it does ask for the student's college ID number. So with the TAP information, because it is a New York State grant, it's going to, so you can now list 20 schools on the FAFSA. So the first New York State school listed is the school that's going to initially get your students' TAP information. So if for any reason that is not their choice, that's not the selected school that they plan to attend, you want to make sure that they've gone back into this application and updated it and put in that current school, the correct school. Because if they put down SUNY Morrisville as their first school and they decide to go to Mohawk Valley, Morrisville is going to get their information. It's going to sit in our system. We're going to send out information asking for updates. And if the student hasn't changed it there, Mohawk Valley would never get the TAP information. So you want to make sure if once they made that decision, that the New York school, if they've chosen a New York school, that you've gone in and updated the TAP information. And again, like I said, they ask for the student's college ID because that's what we'll use to match you up and among other things. But that's the initial thing, is to make sure the school code is in there, the student's ID is in there, and they know that you belong to a certain institution. With the TAP, you can do e-sign or paper, and this is for the parent information because the students will do an electronic signature based on their information that they created when they create their account. But they will use the e-sign goes along with the DMV. So that's going to look at your license information. And if for any reason it can't process that, it will ask you to print the signature page and then you have to send that in. If anything, the most important thing is to make sure if you can do it electronically, get it done electronically, because A, it's going to push it through a little faster, it's going to match up, and it'll be easier for them to track the information. If you have to do the paper signatures, just make sure that you keep a copy, you dated it when you sent it out, so that you know when paper was sent, because it takes longer, obviously. And not to mention that the Like our mail comes into a mail room, gets stored, it gets put into the truck, and then comes to the office. So it could be 2 extra days compared to what would normally be a mailing to get to us. So you just want to make sure that if you have to do any paper, that you're paying attention to that. And just a side note too, if you have a chance to create a folder for your student, so that you have everything in one place, make sure you're writing down your passwords and keeping your PIN numbers, and that you're tracking that information and making a note of when you submitted something, so that you can always go back. So if you call and you ask a question, and we say, well, do you know when this was or who you spoke to? You can always refer back to it. It's just helpful to do that. And I feel like I'm getting something for you. But the biggest thing is to make sure that you are communicating with the institution. Ask your questions. Don't be afraid to ask the same question more than once. And visit their websites and pay attention to deadlines and pay attention to what they're offering to your students. A lot of times you'll find that because, and this is the strangest thing to me, but your students are still dependent, but then they're considered young adults and they're supposed to take care of a lot of this themselves. And we still work a lot with parents, but keeping your student in the loop so they understand what's happening. So when they come in and sit in front of me, it's not like this deer in the headlights look like I have no idea why I'm here and my mom told me to come over. And it's like, okay, but just keeping them in the loop so they understand what's happening. They understand that, this is their debt that ultimately is coming into play because they're taking out these student loans. We do not fight in the financial aid office. We usually offer candy. So, come in, don't be afraid of us. A lot of times they come in and I honestly, like, that first week of school, these kids are terrified. They come in and they're looking at us and it's like, what kind of hurt you? Like, what do you need? What do you tell us? And so once you can pull it out of them, we have a few that frequent the office. I just came by to say hi. What are you doing? And they come and hang out. And so it's nice that they get comfortable with us, but make sure you're asking the questions when you're going to the offices or at least visiting the campuses to see what's going on. Pay attention to the deadlines. That's always a big thing. And it's going to be hard this year because of the change with the FAFSA, but pay attention to the deadlines the school is offering. Do your applications for scholarships. Apply to as many as possible so that you can get as many free dollars as you can. And just so you know, I made sure I wrote the program note because I would always forget. But SUNY started last year free applications. So this week, the week of October 16th to the 29th, are the free SUNY applications. So if you're applying to SUNY schools, they're I forget what they call the application, but it's like a general application for SUNY or the individual schools you can go to. But their application fees will be waived during that week. So if your student has any SUNY schools they're trying to get into or wanting to get into, their free application is open October 16th to the 29th. And Morrisville will probably fire me if I didn't note this, but our open house is the 21st. This weekend is the 14th, right? So it's next Saturday is our first open house for this semester. The next one is in November on the 18th, I think, whatever that Saturday is. So if you're interested in Morrisville, please come by. Like we have a campus here in Norwich, so you don't have to be on the main campus. You can take classes here in Norwich. But come check out what we have to offer. And this is my office contact information. Again, my name is Ms. Banks. And if you have questions, even if it's not directed to Morrisville, if you have questions, please feel free to call us. We're more than happy to help you answer any questions you may have. So, I've thrown out a ton of information to you, and I really feel like I'm forgetting something. I had to change my whole program because of the whole FAFSA thing. So I feel a little discombobulated because I'm like, I feel like I'm missing information, but Do you have any questions for me? So, yes. Okay. General timeline. So, let's work with the October 1 FAFSA window. So, October, you do your FAFSA. Can I do that? Everything just went dark. Okay, sorry. Um, you do your FAFSA, and so that would be October. November, financial aid would start their process, and they would let you know what eligibility you had based on that FAFSA, and that would usually be the week of Thanksgiving or the week after. So end of November, beginning of December. Um, the acceptance process through the admissions office, we're rolling admissions, so if your student applies, they've started to review applications already for this coming fall. So they would, the goal is always to have a response out within 2 to 3 weeks. So depending on when they start the review process, you're looking at any, I would say, to be safe, a 3-week window before you would see a response. Financial aid is usually a 2-week window once we have the FAFSA. And so now you're looking, if everything goes correctly, you would have already applied prior to that October 1 date so that you would have been accepted. We would then have you officially in our system, so you get the award in November, December. And then there's like a lag depending on verification. So if you're not selected for verification, you pretty much have a gap of time before we start to communicate with you again. And that's usually not until early summer to make sure everything's in place. Unless you have not done items along the way, then we keep constant contact. In June, July, you get your actual billing for the fall. They usually give you a month window to make sure everything is taken care of. So if you have taken care of your financial aid and we have everything in place, we then show student accounts what you have coming in, anticipated to come in, and that will go on the bill so that you will see if there's any balance still left. And then the plan is to have you have that paid before you start classes, which is usually mid-August, they want that bill taken care of. And then classes will start for your student the mid to late August timeframe. They used to ask me to have a decision by, I think it was May 1st. I think was always the flag date. We all, since the switch over to having the early application, the October timeframe, we all have upped our awards when they go out. So the majority of them will come out in that November, December timeframe. And as you get them, then you can compare them. And that's actually a very good question, because when you're comparing them, you want to make sure that you're comparing apples to apples. Because you can't compare my package to a community college, because you're not going to see the same outcomes. Even though your cost of attendance at each school is going to be different. Your SAI is going to stay the same, so your financial need is going to be different at all 3 places: community college, private institution, or state institution, because we're not on the same comparative level. So even though they're going to be different, so you have to make sure that if you're looking at community colleges, you're comparing all the community colleges packages. If you're looking at a private institution, that's going to be different because they have endowed money that they can use for scholarships to entice you to come that a state school would not have. So that's why you want to make sure you're looking at the same numbers. So when you go on to, there's a website that has what they call a report card for colleges, and you can get an idea of what our cost of attendance looks like, and then that helps you to kind of say, okay, this is what they're looking to as direct charges. Each school has direct charges. It's pretty comparable. this is what we're getting in L because that's going to stay the same no matter what school you go to. This is what our bottom line is, and this is what we're trying to match. So you're always looking to see whatever, anything that's the same at each institution, block that. Anything that's different, make sure you're comparing what they're offering. Your bottom line is always the financial need. So if I let you all loose right now, you can do it yourself. Of course you can. Well, I thank you very much for your time, and I hope I did not go through this too quickly. But like I said, if you have questions, please do not hesitate to contact us. And if you call and ask for me, just kind of remind me. I was at the Norwich High School because the old lady starts to forget things, and yeah, they call me and go, oh, so-and-so's on the phone. I'm like, yeah, it is, and they're like, oh. So just tell them, I was at Norwich, and they'll go, oh, okay, yeah, no problem. I remember faces, but I don't always remember names. So it was my pleasure to be here, so I thank you for your time.